Okay, so let's talk about something kind of weird. Like, you're running for president, right? You want to be in charge of, like, the biggest military in the world, but you just keep insulting the troops. Doesn't really make sense, does it?
Well, yeah, that's Donald Trump for you.
Yeah, that's Donald Trump, and we're going to, like, really try to understand why he does this.
Yeah.
And it's not, like, just a personality thing. You know, it's like a strategy.
Yeah.
And so to do that, we're going to use an article called Trump's Disrespect.
Yeah.
Military, Autocrats, and Loyalty Tests.
Yeah.
And this was written by Ruth Ben Ghiat. So what do you think?
Well, you've touched on something really, really important here. It's not just, like you said, Trump being, unusual or whatever.
Right.
This behavior, and especially like this thing that happened at Arlington National Cemetery, that was a big part of why this article was written.
Right.
This is about how, like, people who want to be dictators, this is how they act.
Okay, so let's get into that. The article talks about a tactic called, like, breaking. Can you break down for me, like, what that is?
Yeah, so, like, Ben Ghiat says that this is a psychological tactic.
Yeah.
And she says that Trump uses it all the time.
Right.
It's where he purposely tries to, like, put down and embarrass the people around him, from, Republican politicians to, people who like him.
Wow.
So he can be in control. Do you remember when he said to people in Iowa, even if you vote and then pass away, it will be worth it?
Yeah. That's pretty bold.
Yeah.
To say to voters.
Yeah.
So is she saying that is some kind of, like, power move?
Yes, exactly. It's all about, like, making people feel small and like they need him.
Yeah.
And he does this with the military too. Like that thing at Arlington where he, like, used a photo, taking pictures at a soldier's grave for his campaign. That's, like, a really public example of this.
So instead of, like, inspiring people to be loyal by being respectful, he's, like, breaking them down.
Yeah.
To be loyal in a different way.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And it's not just Ben Ghiat who says this.
Right.
Even some of Trump's own family, like Mary Trump and Fred Trump III, have said that he doesn't respect the military. And they say this comes from his dad, Fred Trump Sr.
Right. And Fred Trump III actually said he just doesn't give a shit about them.
Yeah.
He just doesn't. Donald believes in Donald.
Yeah.
That's pretty harsh.
Yeah.
But so how does, like, not respecting the military from your family turn into, like, a political strategy?
Well, that quote, that gets at something really important. Trump only really cares about himself.
Right.
This tactic, this breaking thing we talked about, this is exactly what dictators do.
Oh, yeah.
They want to be the only ones with power, so they attack, like, the military.
Right.
Which is all about, like, service and honor, so they don't have to, like, compete for people's loyalty.
Right. So, like, if the military is a very professional organization, it has its own, like, set of rules, its own leaders.
Yeah.
Then that's, like, a threat to somebody who just wants people to be personally loyal to them.
Right.
I got it. Okay, so are there other, like, historical examples of this kind of behavior?
Yeah, tons.
Oh, okay.
Like, think about Stalin and the Great Purge in the 1930s. He, like, systematically got rid of anybody who he thought was, like, against him, including, like, high up people in the military. He wanted people to be scared.
Right.
And he wanted them to just, like, do whatever he said. This is something you see a lot with dictators.
Right. So then, like, all of Trump's negative comments about people in the military, especially people who died or who were captured, like, that makes more sense now.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Like, remember what he said about John McCain? About, like, people who weren't captured.
Right.
John McCain was a, war hero. He was tortured for years as a prisoner of war.
Yeah.
And Trump, he's attacking, like, the idea of sacrifice and toughness, which is, like, everything the military is supposed to be about.
Yeah, that's a really good example. And it's even more powerful when you think about how Jimmy McCain responded to, like, the whole Arlington thing.
Yeah.
He, like, directly called out Trump. He said, it's not about you there. It's about these people who gave the ultimate sacrifice for their country.
Right. Yeah.
So, like, they have completely different values.
Exactly. See, it shows how Trump is always focused on himself.
Right.
Not on the military or the people in it.
Right.
He just wants to use them.
Right. And General Larry Ellis, who's, like, a retired 4-star general, he said that kind of behavior from, like, anybody else in the military would get them kicked out.
Yeah.
So there's a total double standard.
Right. Like, imagine a soldier making fun of someone who died in battle or being disrespectful at Arlington. They'd be in huge trouble. But for Trump, it's just a chance to get attention.
Okay, so we've talked about this breaking thing and how he doesn't respect the military, and we've talked about dictators. But there's another thing Ben Ghiat talks about that's even more, like, worrisome.
You mean how Trump likes dictators like Putin and Xi Jinping?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's not just that he doesn't like the military.
Right.
It seems like he's doing this on purpose, like as part of some bigger plan.
Yeah. It's about, like, who he's friends with.
Yeah.
And what he wants in the world.
So how does a strong U.S. military, like, get in the way of somebody like Putin? And how does what Trump does, like, help Putin?
Well, Putin wants Russia to be powerful again.
Okay.
And for them to, be like the top dog in the world. And the U.S. military, especially being part of NATO, that stops Putin from doing what he wants.
Okay.
So if you make the U.S. military weaker, cause problems inside it, and break up its alliances, that helps Putin.
Oh, so it's not just about what he says about the military here.
Right.
It's about what that means to these other leaders.
Exactly. It's like he's sending them a message.
So is Ben Ghiat saying that by, like, going after the military, Trump is showing whose side he's really on? She
says that pretty clearly, yeah. She says these attacks show who Trump likes in the fight between democracy and dictatorship. You know, that photo up at Arlington with the thumbs up and the smile?
Yeah.
He might have been doing that for people in other countries, not just here.
That's kind of scary to think about.
Yeah.
But there's another part of, like, what dictators do that we haven't talked about yet. Purges.
Right, purges.
Yeah.
That's another classic move.
Yeah.
Get rid of anyone you don't like, anyone who might disagree.
Yeah.
We saw this with Stalin, right? He got rid of a lot of people in the military. It's about making sure everyone's loyal and no one's a threat.
And have we seen, like, hints of this with Trump?
Right.
Even if it's not as bad as Stalin.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like when he fired those JAG officers,
Right.
They might have disagreed with him. And his supporters, like Pete Hegseth, he said they were roadblocks to anything that happens.
Anything that happens is pretty vague.
Yeah.
That sounds like he just wants to get rid of anyone who questions him, even if they're, like, experts or have real concerns.
That's it, exactly. It's about having people who are loyal, not people who know what they're doing. And it wasn't just the JAG officers.
Right.
Remember when they tried to stop Ben Ghiat from talking at the Naval Academy?
Oh, right, yeah.
She was going to talk about these patterns, these dictator patterns.
Wow. So even talking about dictators is, like, a threat now.
Right.
That's kind of ironic.
It's a classic tactic.
Yeah.
Control the story, shut people up, and don't let anyone challenge you. And they stopped Ben Ghiat, at least for a while. But them trying to stop her is a big warning sign.
Right.
It shows that even the military, a place that's supposed to be strong, can be controlled by these tactics.
It's like a smaller version of the bigger problems we're talking about.
Yeah.
If they're willing to go this far to stop a historian from talking about history, what else will they do?
That's something to think about. And this isn't just about Trump. It's about seeing these patterns, these dictator patterns, wherever they pop up. Doesn't matter who's in charge.
It really makes you wonder, right? Like, are the people in charge even aware of this stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It makes you wonder about, like, what they care about and if they even get it.
Right.
And, like, going back to Ben Ghiat, she wasn't even going to talk about Trump in her lecture.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So what was she going to talk about? Like, what were they so scared of?
Well, her talk was called Coups, Corruption, and the Costs of Losing Democracy.
Okay.
And she wanted to, like, look at what happens to militaries when there are dictators.
Right.
Using, like, Pinochet's Chile and Putin's Russia as examples.
So, like, a bigger historical look at how bad dictators can be for militaries.
Right.
But even that was, like, too much for them.
Yeah.
It seems like they just didn't want anyone talking about anything that might make them look bad.
Yeah, exactly. They don't like open discussion or like critical thinking.
Right.
And the funny thing is, by trying to shut her up, they proved her point.
Right.
Dictators want to control what people hear, and they don't want anyone challenging them.
Yeah, it's like they're trying too hard to hide something.
Yeah.
The more they try to keep this stuff quiet, the more suspicious it seems.
Exactly.
And it's not just Trump or this one thing. This is what dictators do. They control information, they stop people from disagreeing, and they make people scared.
You're exactly right. And that's why we got to understand these tactics, be able to spot them, and push back. We can't just sit around and hope democracy will be okay. We got to actually do something to defend it.
So, like, what are the most important things to remember here? What should people be looking out for, not just in politics, but like in their own lives?
Well, remember, this stuff doesn't always start with like tanks in the streets or people getting arrested.
Right.
It often starts small by changing the rules and what people think is okay.
Right.
Think about how the media is constantly being attacked. how experts are being ignored, how anyone who disagrees is called names, how fake news is being spread. All of this makes people distrust each other and makes it easier for one person to take control.
It's like they're trying to mess with reality, make us question everything, so we have to rely on the leader for, like, answers and comfort.
Right. And when people don't trust each other and are confused, it's way easier to control them.
So how do we stop this manipulation? How do we protect ourselves in our communities?
Well, it's a big challenge, but it starts with being informed and involved. We need to stay up to date on what's happening in our communities, our country, and the world.
So, like, don't just scroll through headlines on social media.
Right, exactly. Be critical of what you read and hear. Get information from different sources and different viewpoints. Don't get stuck in an echo chamber where you only hear what you already agree with.
And most importantly, speak up. Don't be afraid to challenge authority, to call out what's wrong,
Right.
to stand up for democracy, even when it's hard or makes you uncomfortable.
You got it. And remember, this isn't just about politics.
Right.
It's about how we treat each other every day. Are we respectful? Are we listening to different opinions? Are we holding ourselves and others accountable to democratic principles?
So it's about being brave, even in small ways, like calling out a friend who's sharing fake news, sticking up for a coworker who's being bullied, supporting organizations that fight for democratic values. Little things can make a difference.
They totally can. And don't forget about the power of working together. Get involved in your community, join groups that share your values, and participate in discussions about important issues. Democracy needs people to be active, not just watching from the sidelines.
It's like taking care of a garden. You can't just plant the seeds and leave.
Yeah.
You have to water it, pull out the weeds, and protect the plants.
I like that. And remember, democracy is always changing.
Right.
We got to be careful and be ready to adapt. We can't just relax because we won in the past. We got to keep working to make the future we want.
So it's not about being, like, negative or scared all the time. It's about being informed, engaged, and knowing that we can make a difference.
Exactly. And hope is a powerful thing.
Yeah.
The fact that we're having this conversation, that people are worried about these things and want to talk about them, that gives me hope. It means people care, and that's the first step to making things better.
That's a good point. Thanks for, like, going deep on this with me. It's been really interesting, but honestly a little scary too. But I think it's made me more determined to, like, actually do something to protect democracy.
It's been great talking about this stuff with you.
Yeah.
And remember, this conversation doesn't end here. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep fighting for a better future.
Absolutely. Now, going back to those people who tried to keep Ben Ghiat from talking at the Naval Academy, who were they and, like, why did they do it?
Well, it was like a team effort. Several conservative groups and politicians worked together. Groups like the Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation, along with media outlets like the Washington Times and the Daily Signal, they all tried to make her look bad.
So a pretty big group of conservative voices.
Yeah, and they had some power behind them, too. At least 18 Republican members of Congress joined in, writing letters and putting pressure on the Naval Academy to cancel her talk.
So, like, what were their main arguments against her?
They said she was biased, accused her of breaking the law, and they even said that Trump wasn't acting like a dictator.
Wait, they seriously tried to argue that Trump isn't showing signs of being a dictator?
Yeah, they did.
That's hard to believe, especially after everything we've talked about.
It is, isn't it? And this was before some of Trump's more recent actions, which have made it even more clear to many people that he fits the description.
It's like they were trying to pretend that none of this was happening.
That's a key part of how dictators operate. They control the story, they decide what reality is, and they silence anyone who challenges them.
It reminds us that we can't just blindly believe what we're told. We have to think critically, question our own assumptions, and look for different viewpoints.
Absolutely. We can't afford to be complacent. The stakes are too high.
So in a way, Ben Ghiat's experience at the Naval Academy shows us the bigger problems we have in protecting democracy.
Yeah.
It shows us that these tactics aren't just ideas, they actually happen, and they have real consequences. And those consequences can be huge. They can destroy trust, weaken institutions, and even threaten the very foundation of our democracy.
You're absolutely right. It's scary to think about, but it's also a call to action. We can't just sit back and let this happen. We need to be informed, engaged, and actively defend our democracy.
You're right. And speaking of people trying to silence Ben Ghiat, you mentioned Representative Michael Waltz earlier.
I did.
And he's
the head of the National Security Agency now.
wow, okay. I don't even know what to say to that. The person who tried to stop a discussion about authoritarianism is now in charge of one of our most important national security agencies.
It definitely makes you think. Right?
It does. It really does. What does that say about our democracy right now?
That's a question we all need to think about.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot today. What are the most important things you want our listeners to remember?
The big takeaway is this. Everything we've discussed, from how Trump acts to how dictators operate, leads to one really important question. What are WE going to do to protect democracy?
Yeah, it really is. Like, it's easy to just think of this as, politics and stuff, but you're right. This can happen anywhere. So what are some things that people should, watch out for in their own lives? I mean, not just, in Washington.
Right. Well, like I said, these tactics can work anywhere there's a power difference. So first off, think about how information is being used. Are some people's voices always being heard while others are shut down or make fun of? Is it dangerous to disagree? Those are big warning signs.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. It's if you're not mad, you're not paying attention.
Yeah.
But sometimes just being mad doesn't actually help. So what can people actually do when they see this stuff happening?
Start by asking questions. Don't just assume things are true, even your own beliefs. Look for different points of view, read different sources. Don't just believe what people tell you, especially if they're in charge.
So basically, be a little skeptical. Don't just go along with everyone else, even if it's easier.
Exactly. And when you see someone being picked on, silenced, or pushed aside, speak up. Support them, help them be heard, and make space for real, honest conversations. These tactics work best when people are scared and don't care.
Yeah, so we got to be brave, even in small ways.
Right.
Like saying something to a friend who's sharing fake news, defending a coworker who's being bullied, or supporting groups that are fighting for democratic values. Those little things can actually add up, right?
They totally can. And don't forget about the power of everyone working together. Get involved in your community, join groups that share your values, and be a part of the conversation. Democracy needs people who are involved, not just watching.
Yeah. Kind of like taking care of a garden. You can't just plant the seeds and walk away. You have to, water it, take out the weeds, protect it.
I love that. And democracy is always changing too, We got to be careful and willing to change with it.
All right.
We can't just sit back and say, oh, we were fine before. We have to keep working to make the future we want.
So it's not about being gloomy or scared all the time. It's about being informed, involved, and knowing that we can make things better.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And don't forget about hope. The fact that we're even having this conversation, that people are worried about these things and willing to talk about them, that's hopeful. It means people care. And that's the first step to making things better.
Yeah, you're right. Well, this has been really great. Thanks for, diving deep into this with me. It's been eye-opening and, yeah, a little scary. But in the end, I think it's made me feel more ready to do something to protect democracy.
It's been great talking about all this with you. And remember, the conversation doesn't have to end here. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep fighting for a better future.
You got it. And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. We hope this got you thinking and maybe inspired you to be a more informed and active citizen. Remember, the future of democracy is up to all of us.